All right, so my name is Kyler Duncan, and my partner is Joshua Zielbauer, and we will be presenting on France today.
All right, let's cover a brief history of France and how it got to the current economical state that it's in. So, since the 17th century, France has played a large role in both European and worldwide events. Yet, it's experienced a number of roadblocks since the 20th century. There have been political and social upheavings, the loss of a large empire, and even two world wars. Yet, since the Second World War, France has been able to bounce back and restabilize their economy and rebuild fairly well. They are now a supplier of agriculture and industrial projects and a major partner in the EU, or the European Union. And since this time, France has been able to recover their economy and their cultural aspects. But we'll cover more of that in later slides.
So, starting with the environment of France, around 40% of people in France declare that global warming or climate change is the most important environmental factor France is facing today. France also offers many natural resources to the international market, such as coal, iron ore, and bauxite, those being the top three for France, along with zinc and uranium and plenty of more. Um, Also, the French landscape is made of relatively low lying plains, plateaus, and mountain blocks. The landscape is found within the pattern of the Alps and the Pyrenees. So, a lot of this type of landscape is prevalent throughout many countries in Europe. And then we also have French architecture, which can be described as medieval. French Gothic architecture was prevalent in the country from 1140 to 1500 and can be categorized into four groups, which are the early Gothic, High Gothic, Rayonnette, and Late Gothic.
All right, let's take a quick look at France's governmental, political, and social stance. So, France is set up a bit different than us in the fact that they're a semi presidential system. This is determined by the French Constitution of the French Fifth Republic. What that pretty much means is that the president of the republic or the head of state appoints the prime minister of France, which then becomes the head of the government, which is kind of just set up into two stations rather than the one that we have here in the US. The nation declares itself to be an indivisible, secular, democratic, and social republic, kind of just dipping their hands into multiple pots for whatever situation it fits best, which is truly something that we do and a lot of other places around the world are beginning to adopt. France follows more of a civil law opposed to our common law system. Civil law relies on the written statutes and other legal codes that are consistently being updated um, and establish those legal procedures, legal punishments, and what is brought before the court, as opposed to our more common law system. The making of the law is pretty similar to most democratic societies, including our own. In France, the laws are proposed by the government and then passed between two houses of the French Parliament, the National Assembly and the Senate. So overall, fairly similar, but does have its differences.
And then going into cultures and customs of France, formal greetings are always bonjour, and informal greetings tend to be the double or triple kiss that you often see. As far as their families in France, it's pretty traditional and cultural to have closely knit families. And also, marriage rates have been declining. Sorry for that typo, but marriage rates have been declining. And friendships can also be described as cold in France, but it's simply that they just have very close knit relationships that take a lot of time to develop trust in those things. So it comes across the wrong way. And of course, food and drink in France are held to very high standards and reputation. The French cuisine has its reputation. So, like we talked about earlier in this class, Starbucks and different fast food restaurants have to have a lot higher quality of food in France than in other countries. And in public, it's normal to be seen or normal to be kind of discreet when you're out in public, but intimacy is also emphasized. And so speaking in quiet tones in restaurants is emphasized. And also, as far as arriving places, you want to arrive always about 10 to 15 minutes late because showing up on time can be seen as rude. When you're being a guest, it's important to know the etiquette. However, the French are forgiving towards foreigners, and it's customary to bring small gifts for your when you're a guest, but never food unless you're asked to. So these are some things that you kind of need to look up on. They're pretty extensive, from table etiquette to being a guest, and just small things like that. It gets pretty extensive from what I was looking at.
Values and context. Generally speaking, teams and family values are held highly in France. Individual success leads to the well being of the group. That being said, each person is therefore responsible for their decisions and productivity in that society. Culturally speaking, there are some similarities and differences between us and France. One similarity is that introductions are held importantly. Handshakes are a custom upon both arrival and departure. It is also important to address people by their titles, especially in business sense. When talking to a boss or a CEO, it is proper to use the right terminology. One thing I've seen, and I'm sure many of you all, is that many customs in France is to kiss one another on the cheek when arriving or departing from an event. This is usually done between close family members or close friends, but there are circumstances outside of that which it is custom. Learning those circumstances is important, and it actually differs from region to region. It is also custom to bring gifts to small dinners or events, whether it be a glass of wine or a candle, none the matter. Gifts are custom. It's also important to know when to drink in France. The host will always, if not always, or likely, pour the drink for you. If the host does not refill the drink after you finish the glass, it's likely a good social cue that the time to leave is coming. It is also important to note that the French have a strong sense of humor. They joke around about a variety of topics at a variety of different times.
And then moving on, we have some business customs. So when you're in a business meeting in France, you should always address someone uh, in business format as monsieur or madame, unless you are invited to call them by their first name or something otherwise. Also, it's important to wear formal business attire unless you're invited to dress otherwise. And it's also good to note that business casual is just considered as no tie, but it's still well dressed and groomed. So it's not quite the same business casual that we have out here in the US. Long term business relationships are very important to the French, and it's important to make an effort and engage in light talk. This is kind of goes along with building those relationships and things like that. Discussions may flow from topic to topic and stray, and that's okay. That's part of the light talk and engaging in personal conversation. And then it's also good to note that France is a hierarchy, so decisions are often being made from the upper echelons of authority.
Tourism. There's many big attractions in France that we all know of, such as the Eiffel Tower, Louvre Museum, and Cathedral of Notre Dame, but there are plenty more. Why people tend to visit is because of the art, culture, and cinema. French also has world-renowned cuisine, and people tend to love their beautiful beaches and cities.
And compared to the world, we have France is labeled the 64th freest economy. France is also one of the world's most modern countries and sees itself as a leader amongst the European nations. Its total value of exports and imports of goods and services equals 63.4% of its GDP. And that GDP is $3.0 trillion with a growth rate of 1.5%. And the unemployment rate in France is 9.2%. Overall, kind of what I get from this is that France is a very well developed country, and it plays a big role in the EU and as well as the other European nations. Some interesting facts are that the world's most popular tourist destinations all reside in France. French was also the official language of England for 300 years. The French army were the first to use camouflage in war, which was in 1915. Also, it's legal to marry a dead person. in France. And the French invented tin cans, the hair dryer, and the hot air balloon. It was also the first country to ban supermarkets from throwing away food, so kudos to that. And it also had the oldest person to ever live was living in France, which died at 122 years old. France has also won the most Nobel Prizes for literature than any other country, and the world's first artificial heart and face transplant took place in France. So even from these interesting facts, we can see that France is a leader in different aspects and definitely has standards as far as literature. We saw earlier in food and other things like that.
Questions for the class. Number one, what do you see as a large cultural difference between us and France? Maybe some examples of things that they maybe value more opposed to us, or vice versa. And feeding off that, question number two, what should you know when going into a business meeting in France? And finally, question number three, knowing France's current position, how would we adapt our advertising from here to better suit the French culture?
And here is my works cited. Thank you.